Good afternoon and welcome to the panel on Building Effective Incubators. I'm Suresh Kumar, the President of Indian Steps and Business Incubator Association and also the Executive Director of PAG STEP, the Incubation Center associated with PAG College of Technology, Coimbatore. It gives me immense pleasure to be part of the 5th year celebration of launch of Startup India, the initiative that had given a paradigm shift in the startup landscape of our country. Incubators and accelerators have always been playing an important role in helping and building the startup ecosystem, and this has been further proven during the COVID era. The COVID-19 pandemic has posed unprecedented challenges for the startup ecosystem. The incubators are addressing these challenges faced by the startups with the internal strengths of the incubators and with the support from government agencies. ISBA, the Indian Steps and Business Incubators Association, was started in the year 2004 by a small network of technology, entrepreneur parks, and technology business incubators. Today, ISBA is the pan-India network of 100 plus incubators that are into entrepreneurship development and incubation and has an abundance of expertise and knowledge base in technology business incubation that has been acquired over a period of 35 years. It is very clear that business incubators can be sound platforms to bring about economic development in any economy. The support offered includes state-of-the-art equipments, management assistance, mentoring, access to finance, flexible and low-cost incubation spaces, office services, etc. Incubators are expected to produce ongoing impact in the form of creating new entrepreneurs, generating jobs and revenue to fuel local economies. In setting up an incubator, we are essentially building a robust organization capable of sustainably creating high value. The fundamental blocks of organization development milestones of an incubation center are related to developing strong team, pipeline, strong support for incubated companies, organizational processes, policies, and systems, and last but not the least, financial sustainability for incubator. A deeper understanding of the critical resources is needed to improve the quality of business incubators, and as the stakeholders of the incubation ecosystem, we should ensure the availability of such resources to build a successful incubator. To give us a perspective on good practices to build a successful incubator, we have 7 eminent personalities from the startup ecosystem representing different economies from Asia. It's my pleasure to introduce panelists to the session. We have with us today Mr. Ramanan, Mission Director, Atal Innovation Mission, and Additional Secretary, Niti Aayog, Government of India. As the Mission Director of Atal Innovation Mission, Ramanan has been instrumental in the launch and execution of several nationwide innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives, resulting in 10,000 plus Atal Tinkering Labs in schools, 102 Atal Incubation Centers in universities, industries for fostering startups, 24 Atal New India Challenges to stimulate product innovations along with Ministries of India. And he has been instrumental in building up the largest mentorship networks with over 10,000 plus registrations nationwide. We welcome you, sir. We have with us Mr. Sanad Mirali from Bangladesh, who is the partner of IDLC Venture Fund 1. Sanad is an angel investor since 2013 and co-founded Startup Dhaka, an entrepreneurship development company, and under the Startup Dhaka initiative, he spearheaded the design and operations of the GP Accelerator, the first startup accelerator in Bangladesh. He helped launch and manages Bangladesh's first formally managed venture capital fund, IDLC VC Fund 1. Welcome, Mr. Sami. We have with us Dr. Shering Sigai Doji, CEO of Thinkwood Tech Park Limited, Bhutan, the first IT park and innovation and technology center. With his deep passion for technology and youth entrepreneurship, he has been instrumental in making the IT park a vibrant place where hundreds of youths. We also have Mr. Tashi from Bhutan, who is the founder of HiHub and iTravel. Having worked with government, abroad, and in private sector that has given him a life-changing experience, Mr. Tashi took an entrepreneurship journey and founded HiHub and iTravel. He worked with CIU Academy Asia, based in Singapore, and with Bhutan ICT 9 Training Association. He is also the co-founder and IT advisor of Team Happy. We have Mr. Narottam Aryal from Nepal. Mr. Narottam is the president of King's College, Kathmandu. He served as the convener of the Startup Ecosystem Development Committee of Ministry of Industry, Government of Nepal. Narottam has been a mentor to several startups in Nepal and has been actively involved in developing entrepreneurship ecosystem. We welcome Mr. Narottam. Along with us today, we have Mr. Mano from Sri Lanka. He is a serial tech entrepreneur and is the founder and chief executive officer of 99X. The company 99X, under his stewardship, has been listed among the top 25 best companies to work for in Sri Lanka for 8 consecutive years, and is ranked among Asia's best workplaces for the year 2020. He is also the founder of Startup X Foundry, one of Sri Lanka's first tech startup accelerators, and the chairman of Lankan Angel Network. I'm happy to introduce Ms. Sansini, the Director of Business Innovation Center, National Science and Technology Development Agency, Thailand. Ms. Sansini has been instrumental in fostering and incubating more than 2,000 new technology entrepreneurs and startups in the last 10 years through Business Innovation Center of NSTDA's incubation programs. She runs cross-incubation program for startups between Thailand and other countries. Sansini is one of the key persons to drive Thailand's startup ecosystem and innovation-driven enterprises under Ministry of Higher Education, Science, Research and Innovation. With this introduction and with the opening remarks, I request our very learned and esteemed panelists to share their perspectives on good practices to build successful incubators. To start with, I have a question which I am addressing to 4 of our panelists, Mr. Ramanan, Mr. Doji, Mr. Narottam, and Mr. Manoj. Here is the question. Incubators play a vital role in nurturing startups and spurring innovation in the country. While incubators are funded through the same resources, some incubators outperform the rest. In your opinion, what factors determine the success of an incubator? Let's start with Mr. Ramanan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh Kumar, and it is indeed a pleasure and a privilege for me to be able to join this very esteemed panel to deliberate on a topic that is so very important to all the nations concerned and onto the world in general. We are indeed living in unprecedented times, as the COVID-19 times that you mentioned, and it is also a time when technology has become affordable, accessible, available, and advanced. We are part of fast-growing economies. India is in particular part of a fast-growing economy. And we also enjoy what is called as a demographic dividend, which is the envy of many a country, where more than 65% of our people are under 35 years old. And we have a very rich, energetic, youthful workforce who are aspiring to make a difference to the rest of the world. Now, it is very important when these 3 factors are converging to be able to empower our young students from universities and from the industry to be able to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams and to be able to make an impact through their imagination, their ideas, by cultivating an ecosystem that will promote and will nurture startups. And that is why world-class incubators are required, because these world-class incubators enable these young startups to be able to overcome great valleys of death, as they call, in a startup's life cycle. Valleys of death because the startups don't have the right support during their technology creation phase or during their research lab access, which they need often to create the solutions and perfect the solutions during the initial stages. They don't have access to venture capital support or mentoring support or business planning and strategy support or the ability to build a comprehensive team where the solution needs different types of people to be able to contribute to make that a success. Now, a world-class incubator becomes successful when they focus on these some simple aspects. That is why the incubator is in place. Number one, are they able to attract and nurture good innovation from the ecosystem where they are placed? For example, in Atal Innovation Mission, we have launched more than 68 incubators, but these incubators are at different places across the country because the needs of the country are diverse. And in each part of the country, there are specific industries, there are specific universities, there is a specific need to nurture innovation which can immediately have an impact. So if an incubator is surrounding the ecosystem with appropriate backing of a collaborative network of industries, academia, as well as technology access and research access to the startups immediately find that their idea starts finding expression and ability to be implemented in the areas around them. So that is one very important part. The second one is how do you ensure that they build a collaborative network of venture capitalists, of mentors, as well as of best business practices around them. So this can only be possible when they interact closely with the industry which is surrounding them, or with industry which is relevant to that particular startup. Every startup would have a certain area of focus, whether it is in e-commerce, whether it is an agri startup or a biotech startup or a healthcare startup. How effectively that incubator is able to bring the access of the relevant industry partners to the domain of that startup, and thereby enrich the startup with the market knowledge that is required for the startup to be success and to be able to fill the gap. And finally, an incubator should ensure that they have a very rigorous process of being able to build a great team for the startup. Now, often a startup, the founder has a great idea. There may be a co-founder along with them, but they need that to be supported with a tremendous other capabilities that need a startup success. As they say, a team approach is required. And in that, the incubator and the startup should form a team together to complement the areas where the particular startup is lacking. For example, financial management or intellectual property management, or the management of HR for the system, or the making available an IT system. That is, for a startup, it may be very costly in the initial stages. They are not able to afford to build a sophisticated IT system. But for an incubator which is supporting multiple startups, they are able to enable them to have access to such IT systems which are required today. And finally, I think an incubator makes a startup succeed when they provide that robust ecosystem around them through capacity building, through training programs, through outreach events, which a startup alone by themselves are not able to do. Whereas an incubator, because of the power of its aggregation of multiple startups and its networking with other incubators, that is very important. Very often incubators work in a silo, and we should make sure that incubators see the power of networking with other incubators. For example, in our Atal Innovation Mission that we have launched across the country, just in the last 2.5 years, these 68, 70 incubators have networked together, and now they have a pool of resources of venture capitalists and business planning and strategists and mentors who are now accessible to any startup in any one of those incubators. That approach will ensure success of a startup and thereby the success of an incubator.
Thank you, sir, for giving the overall view covering all the pillars of the incubator's operations. Moving to Doji for the same questions, what is your opinion on this? Why some of the incubators are performing and why few of them are struggling? Mr. Doji from Bhutan.
So, very good afternoon to all the viewers. It is a privilege and honor for me to be on this panel and share some of the experiences that I have from the Bhutanese ecosystem. So I have been working with the first business incubation center in Bhutan at Thimphu Tech Park since 2012. So before I answer the question directly, I would like to very briefly lay out the kind of ecosystem we currently have in Bhutan. So from the general perspective, I would say that the Bhutanese startup ecosystem is still very nascent, still in the early stages, and with the need to get a lot of support from all different quarters and take it forward in a much bigger way. So currently, if I were to just quickly reflect on the ecosystem, so overall, the ecosystem in Bhutan is largely government driven. I think it is expected for a country of a small size like ours. So most of the initiatives that have initiatives around the startup ecosystem and entrepreneurship development have come from the government side. But having said that, there has also been some initiatives from the private sector side, like my co-panelist, Mr. Tashi. He runs an incubation center in Bhutan called iHub. It's a private initiative from his side. And there has been another important private initiative. That's the first Fab Lab in Bhutan was set up through a private initiative. So we have a Fab Lab here in the capital city, Thimphu. And overall in the ecosystem, we have government players like the Ministry of Labor and Human Resources, the Department of Cottage and Small Industry. Then we have the corporate sector, government state-owned corporate sector like Duke Holding and Investments. And we also have players from the NGO sector or the so-called civil society organization sector. It's largely two important players from that sector, Loden Foundation and Renew. So there are quite a number of players in the ecosystem now. When I started with the incubation center at Thimphu Tech Park, there were much fewer players and it was not as vibrant as it is now. But despite having so many players in the ecosystem now, still one of the things that is missing is more coordinated and focused approach. So I feel that this is something missing, and the government seems to be aware of this, and the government is looking at maybe bringing about a more coordinated and focused approach towards entrepreneurship development and the startup ecosystem in Bhutan. Now, with this little background, to answer the question that Suresh ji has asked, in my opinion, one of the first important factor for the success of an incubator is the management team or the leadership team in the incubation center. Unless there is a very dedicated, who are very passionate about helping other entrepreneurs, and who are very passionate about the startup initiatives in general, I think it's very difficult to make an incubation center deliver as we would like it to. And I think in this sense, I can even give the example of Dr. Suresh Kumar, moderator himself. He has played a very big role in making the incubation center in PSG Tech a success. I have been there a long time back, but now I'm sure that it is even more a success than what it used to be. Even that time, it was very well equipped and it was a very vibrant incubation center. So I think management team, I think, is very, very important. And secondly, mentorship, I think, is very important, because many of the young entrepreneurs, they do not come with a lot of experience, so they need mentorship in all aspects of running a startup, running a business. Thirdly, the support system, the ecosystem in general, the support system that is there within the ecosystem or the society in general, I think that plays a very big role. In Bhutan, for instance, we are not very, accepting of failures. So that is a difficulty for entrepreneurs, because your ideas will not always succeed. So I think acceptance of failure, I think, is very important. And the fourth, I think the entrepreneurs really need a lot of help in access to market. So they come up with this new idea, And now when they want to take that idea to the market, I think they face a lot of challenges. So from the incubation center leadership team, a lot of help is needed in terms of helping the entrepreneurs take their ideas to the market. And finally, the access to finance, I think, is important. So a lot of incubation centers have different models. Some have, maybe interest-free loan, low interest loan. Some may take a small equity stake in the entrepreneur's idea in exchange for the support. But I think the access to finance through maybe venture capital, seed funding, or maybe in terms of certain grant from the government side, I think these are very, very important. So I think I'll leave it there for now, but for Bhutan, there is really lots and lots to learn. So participating in this kind of events is really one of the ways that we can learn from the other ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you, Doji. It's really happy to learn from you about the development that has happened in your country in last 10 years. And still, I remember the team from Bhutan visiting various incubators across the country during the year 2011-12. It's almost 8 years down the line. I'm seeing many departments, many ministries have started supporting the incubation movement in your country, small country. Congratulations to you and to your team. I move on to Mr. Narottam from Nepal. And I'm also aware that your country has also been involved in promoting incubation activities in last 1 decade. And can you brief about your ecosystem and also share the success factors according to you that determines the success of an incubation center?
Namaste and good afternoon. Thank you, Suresh. Once again, thank you so much. And thank you, really thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be with such an esteemed panelists. And I'm really delighted and honored to be here. I think Nepal is not that different from what our friend from Bhutan shared about his ecosystem. Nepal's entrepreneur ecosystem is also not very old and not very mature. It's been around a decade or so that we have been discussing about this modern sense, startup ecosystem. So what I'm trying to say is it's really taking off. There are a lot of glitches and there are a lot of gaps and overlaps again. So things are happening in bits and pieces, but then we are able to consolidate these efforts, reflect critically and design the way forward seriously. I think one of the missing links is unlike in India, and I don't know about other countries, little bit familiar with Bhutan. One of my very close friends from Nepal, he has been quite actively involved in Bhutanese ecosystem and as a consultant. So he has been talking about how Bhutanese government has taken the lead in creating that ecosystem. But then sadly, Nepal government has not come up with that integrated vision and long-term vision as to how to bring together the actors and players of the ecosystem together and sort of create a consolidated strategy to take this ecosystem forward. Hopefully the government will also sort of come up with that, despite our lot of lobbying and all. So maybe due to several reasons, we are not yet there. But then the good side is that we have that vibe, especially in Kathmandu and the other cities like Pokhara, Chitwan, and all the cities of Nepal. We can see that great vibe. And there are a lot of private players. And interestingly, I don't know unlike in India, I think I have not really heard so much of involvement of the donors in this ecosystem. But then donors are an important player in Nepal. So these days, many donors are sort of funding these incubation activities, not directly, but then like in one of sponsoring the events and sort of like, conferences and all. So that means like we can see that donors are also sort of like coming to this space. One thing like, we can notice is that this incubation startup has become a buzzword. It has become the thing to talk about, but still like, lacks the substance. We feel that, I don't know if that is the case, that is the sort of like, way we move forward. But then like, we feel that it's high time we critically reflect it and see the substance as well. So let me like tell you like what exactly I was trying to say, that there are species like designated species called incubation center and innovation center. You can see these kind of places almost everywhere these days in. But then like, if you go and look at the kind of activities they do and the kind of impact they have created, there is a problem, right? So sometimes like it's very hard. Many people like ask me how many incubators are there in Nepal, so it's very hard to answer. So how can we really define that incubation? Most of the time, like, people can get confused with they organize boot camps, but then like they prefer to call it like incubation. They organize workshops, but then they call it like, incubation. They have a space, doesn't have anything else, but then they like to call it incubation center. So it is very hard to sort of like, differentiate between whether it's a boot camp or incubation center, incubation, or whether there is or designated space. Can we call that like, incubation center? So until it has sort of like, in an ecosystem in itself, like Mr. Ramanan said before. So incubation basically means having an ecosystem, support ecosystem around it. So this is the kind of scenario in Nepal. But talking about what makes an incubator effective, let me like tell you one anecdote. I think like last January, I was in Mumbai, again representing Nepal in a panel of discussion about the incubation and the startup ecosystem in Nepal. While discussing, I had received a question from a dean of one of the one of the business schools in India. He said, like, despite like, having a designated space, despite having a curriculum and entrepreneurship, we've not been able to sort of attract the student or attract the startups and sort of like create the startups out of these incubation. So what is the magic, or what is the sort of like strategy as to how we can make it successful? So I think like now, reflecting back, what I realized in our childhood, we used to be told it requires a village to educate a child. I think that really sort of like resonates now. While we talk about the success of a startup, incubator, I really want to use that phrase, sentence, that it requires an entire ecosystem and support system to make it effective. As mentioned before, only having a fancy infrastructure or having like, curriculum in place or running like, workshops doesn't really guarantee the success of this incubation. So I think I don't want to go into the details now, because most of the things have been really covered by our like fellow speakers before. So for me, I think three critical elements. One, of course, like, what kind of ambience you have created, what kind of support system you have created. And the third thing, I think like, which was not discussed before, at least like in Nepal, what I can really see in Nepal is even the startups needs pampering and support, even psychological support, to be able to retain them throughout the incubation period. As sort of like incubation management, you have to be really get involved with the individual teams every time, So they have themselves had a lot of psychosocial problems, family issues, and team issues, and all. So as the manager of the incubator, if you could really understand their problems, issues, even at the personal level, family level, and engage them with them and provide that moral support as well. So that's what I think I would like to add. So thank you. I stop here.
Uh, Thank you, Director. The incubation movement will always be evolving, and we have been evolving since 1983, where the first incubation center has been established in the name of Science and Technology Entrepreneurs Park. And then the greatest shift happened after 2000, 2001. And the third wave happened after Atal Innovation Mission has been established, and now almost all the departments, either it is electronics or biotechnology, PPT or MIT, agriculture department, every ministry has an incubation center. But for us, it took about 3 decades to reach to 300 plus incubators. And at this time, I have to thank the efforts of Atal Innovation Mission and especially Mr. Ramanan, who had made the state governments to come forward in having the startup policies, and the state governments have started supporting the institutions or private incubators also. So for us, the journey was about more than 3 decades. And but we are there with you, and we'll help you out in reaching this stage very quickly and easily. And I'm also taking cue out of it. Mr. Ramanan was mentioning that the success of the incubator lies in the success of the startups. And you have went one step deeper. To make these startups to be successful, we have to pamper them, we have to handle them, and I can see the startup ecosystem in there. Thank you for the inputs. And now I move to Mr. Mano from Sri Lanka. I know that last 2 decades, Sri Lanka has been coming out with a lot of initiatives on promoting startups in your country, right? And can you say a few words about those initiatives and the stage at which Sri Lanka is today in the startup ecosystem? Over to you, Mr. Mano.
So first of all, thank you, Suresh, and thank you for having me. And I'm so happy, and it's a privilege to be in this panel. So first of all, as you said, I'll just give you a snapshot about where Sri Lanka today and in the startup ecosystem and what we have been doing. So as a country, from a macroeconomic perspective, entrepreneurship is very important for our growth. We believe the next phase of our growth will come from the companies are yet to be born, and then from the startups, and from the entrepreneurs who will drive our economy, right? So this is very, very clear from a government perspective, and there is enough encouragement for entrepreneurship and startups. Private sector has played a tremendous role in having making this happen. There are government agencies. So we have, over a period of last 10 years, we have built an ecosystem. There are angel investors, there are VCs, there are incubators, and the nation has a plan. It's a collective plan to build about 1,000 startups. We are around 400, we have 600 to go to build this whole ecosystem. For us, success is not how many startups actually succeed, but how many people we can get into the ecosystem, because failure is a part of learning. You will know these people. Even if you fail, you become a better employee. And it brings the whole skill level of the country to have this entrepreneur mindset and to ignite innovation, because innovation is very important in all our primary industry, whether it is tourism, whether it is agriculture. So tech division, we are very, very conscious that it is the disruptive innovation will take our primary industry to the next level. So I think there is a very clear vision for the country, and the agencies and the private sector work in a very collective manner. So there are about 15 startups. I run one of the corporate startup, and I have some experience which I will share. So we have this theme, Startup Nation. We want to be a startup nation. And then that's how we want to focus ourselves. And then to really to have the economic trust, the engine behind the startup, going really right down to the bottom of the pyramid and to the regions. Okay, so that's basically my summary of our ecosystem. We're a smaller country, but we have ambitious plan and hope we are able to achieve those. Coming back to your question about how do you differentiate good startups or successful, incubators from others, I think a lot has been said. But I just want to focus on three important things, which I believe is very important. If you look at, if you want to fund a startup, whether you're a VC or an angel investor, what do you really look for? Of course, the idea, but most importantly, we look at the team, right? We'll really look at the team because the team is very important part of a successful startup. So I think incubators have to look building that team, and then that makes a very, very big part of the incubator to support of building the team. Because 60% of all startups, if you take data points, fail because of its management, unable to execute, right? We know ideas are cheap. It all depends on how well you execute. So I think one of the key reasons, in my experience, I have seen startup is not that they have come out with a brilliant idea, it's groundbreaking technology, but are unable to execute. And then it all revolves around team. And also we have seen that startups, if you take worldwide, only 25% of the founders remain as CEOs. So this tells us a lot, right? Is to be a successful startup, for me, one of the most important thing is to have the right team. The right team will fail fast, the right team will validate, right team will look at the addressable market and get the funding. So I think one of the most important part of a incubator is to ensure that you build and coach the right team, right? And this is something is very important. As our incubators get matured, the rest everyone has spoken of. The other one is endurance, right? We have to give startups time, right? It is important. It's not to have programs which are crashed and etc. And it takes about 3 to 5 years for a good startup to hit the road and then start making. And you need to have that patience and the endurance, what is important. And finally, is about networking, right? Do you need to have cross-border alliance? You need to ensure that you connect with them, with the ecosystem, not only in your country, but into the global sphere. So I think I just wanted to focus on those three things, which is important for you, for anyone who is running incubators, to focus on these things. Of course, you have the rest in terms of finance, network, blah, blah, blah. But these, for me, I think others have been said, I think, have shared. But for me, these are the three most important things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mano, for the insights, and even the insight that incubation center, right, is not ensuring the success of the incubator, but at least the impact of the failure has to be reduced. That point is really good. And we used to say that when even a startup fails in an incubation center, right, they should not feel bad, and the impact of the failure should be very minimal. And we should give a feel or want that they should come back with the second idea to the same incubation center and take forward. And thank you for the insights. And good to know that most of the panelists have covered the same points, but in different angles. And more importantly, the teamwork and network of incubators, right? Because we have about 300 plus incubators, we had the luxury to network and leverage the resources. Thank you for the messages. Now I move on to Mr. Tashi, who has established a private incubator in Bhutan. Mr. Tashi, being a private incubator, right, the objective might be different. And according to you, what is the impact of an incubation center in creating a sustainable and strong entrepreneurial support?
Okay, firstly, thank you so much. And then, like all the panel here, let me express my gratitude and privilege to have given this opportunity to share my experience. And yeah, I think like my co-panelist, Dr. Sige shared that, incubation, the entrepreneur ecosystem itself is a quite in the nascent stage at the moment. So even some of my friends, when I say I run an incubation, they still feel that I own a poultry farm. So see where we are at the incubation stage. So we are at very nascent stage. But one of the key point or the key input in building a sustainable and a strong entrepreneur support infrastructure, we need a like a strong supply of entrepreneur talent. So when I say entrepreneur talent, it doesn't mean just about startup entrepreneur, but also about people who embody the entrepreneurial spirit to take on the various supporting roles in the ecosystem. We have key hires in startup, venture capital, angel investor, manager of the accelerator program or the incubator, employee with significant innovation, new businesses, development roles in large corporation, high-tech firms, and the government agency promoting innovation ecosystem are all needed to build that strong entrepreneur infrastructure. And then another area is that I see, which we don't really have right now, is making a business climate very attractive to the investor and the entrepreneur, to the investor as well as to the entrepreneur by becoming the voice of the ecosystem. So voice of the ecosystem and working with the policy reforms. Policy reform is one of the key component that is needed to build a strong and entrepreneur ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Tashi, for mentioning about the policy reforms and also about the talents that is required for the ecosystem. Since you have mentioned about the policy reforms, right, my next question is to Ms. Sansane from Thailand, who is heading the Business Innovation Center of National Science and Technology Development Agency. Sansane, what are the policies in Thailand that have spurred the growth of the incubation ecosystem?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, our own friend Suresh, that I met him long times, and thank you for Startup India to give another opportunity for NASDA and Thailand to join this panel. In Thailand, we start to put the policy we call Startup Thailand in 2016. I think the beginning same as in Sri Lanka, because we think if we would like to drive country, so we have to put it like in a national agenda. And it's about 4 points that we are thinking that startup is very important. Our Prime Minister on 2016, actually our core team write out to him and he agreed that Thailand want to support startup because there are new economic barriers. It means we have a lot of SME who can contribute to GDP of the country. But sometimes you will see that SME change a little bit slow and they are not take risk. But startup from the young generation, they are ready to take risk and they are keen on technology. They was born with the technology. So we think startup, it's kind of a new hope to drive our new economy. But it doesn't mean that we will leave SME behind, because we're thinking that actually SME is a key driver to country GDP. But when we would like to change, especially we would like to add some technology or some innovation, we will use startup to be the key driver, working along with the big corporate, also with the SME. So when we're driving startup in Thailand, we're thinking that incubation center is one of the key point and key driver. because in Thailand, we have a few government incubator. NASA also one of the governments, and we have almost 100 university business incubator. And university, they are very close to new generation. So we set up the policy we call entrepreneurial university. So all the university in Thailand, you have to build up the entrepreneurial skills with the young people since they was in the university. So after they graduate, so they have an experience to working in corporate or some new generation, they start their business. So they have the entrepreneurial skill that built up since they was in the university. The other policy of government, we try to helping startup to like reach out the market. That is a big market. It is a B2G. Actually, we are incubator and we try to help them to get the market access to B2B or sometimes B2C. But in Thailand, B2G is a huge market and it's very hard for startup to reach out. So NASA set up one we call a Thailand Innovation List. If you are startup or if you are technology entrepreneurs, you have your own technology, you have some standardized, so you can register in the Thailand Innovation List, and the government can make a procurement privately for you. So this is the other way that we try to make the opportunity for new startup to reach out the big market. It is a government market. Another policy is about is for doing business. We are very close to Singapore. When I talking with a Singaporean incubator, he always said that in Singapore, you can set up company within half day. But in Thailand, it's a lot of documents and long process. I think it's maybe about 1 week. So we try to adjust our law and regulation to support for doing business. We write down some policy to make some incentive for the investor, since angel investor up to VC, the venture capitalist can take like some privilege or tax incentive if you invested in startup. So this is another policy that we are trying to change. And but every step of governments, we are watching that it will not harmful the currently SME. So for changing or adjust law and regulation, it's kind of moving slowly, but we try to do it. And also, if we're talking about law and regulation, we are welcome for the talents from overseas. So we do smart visa to open the long-term visa for the CEO or the startup from overseas can set up the company in Thailand very easy. So that is another one that we do. And because we have almost 100 of incubator. So, and NASA is a government incubators who got the award winner of the Incubator of the Year from ASEAN Association of Business Incubator since 2016. So we do maturity model to do like evaluation performance of the incubators. Because in Thailand, if you are a startup and you set up company by yourself, the successful rate will be 10%. But if you using incubator, so you can be success up to 30%. So we think if we focusing on improving incubators, it will be make the mass impact to help the startup. Also in NASDAQ, we are national. We have 5 national research center. So we would like to drive startup based on technology. So my incubator helping startup to add some more technology to make a competitive advantage. So we have a nanotechnology, biotechnology, energy technology, and material technology, and also electronic, AI, IoT. So right now in Thailand, we are focusing on deep tech startup, and we link up the investor around the world who would like to invest in the deep tech startup. So this is something that it's Thailand government support the ecosystem and Thailand tech startup. However, we are running Startup Thailand for 5 years already, and we see that after we try to build up the complete ecosystem. So we have government support, we have corporate VC, we have private sector from a big corporate, and we have actually we can say that we have a lot of VC and angel investor. But right now, Thailand falls with some problem that we don't have the qualified startup enough to get invested. So right now we try to sharpening the incubator mechanism to be better, especially in VUCA world, in the COVID-19, make the incubator have to help startup a lot to change a new business model to make them can adjust themselves fit to the new normal business. So this is some overview of the Thai startup ecosystem and incubator.
Thank you, Sansani. Good to know that you have come out with a comprehensive policy, right, 2016. And also good to know that you have more than 100 plus incubators in your country. And I'll come back to you with the COVID-19 questions related to COVID-19 a little bit later. Moving towards the next important factor of an incubation center. This question I want to ask the investor, Mr. Samet from Bangladesh. Right. Samet, you are aware that incubators' primary role is to support startups, and financial support acts as an important pillar. According to you, how can incubators and venture funds collaborate to nurture the ecosystem better? Because you are leading the Dhaka ecosystem there, but as an investor. So we want
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question, and I'd like to echo my respected panelists and thanking you for having us here to the hosts, Startup India, Government of India, for having us. It's a pleasure to be a part of this collaborative spirit, which I think all incubators have mentioned so far about this collaborative spirit. I think we heard about it being taking a village. So even that regional collaboration is very important in coming up with best practices and finding out how we can all improve our own ecosystems. So personally, I'm a venture capitalist, but I didn't start that way. Today, I manage a fund called the IDLC Venture Capital Fund in Bangladesh. I actually started off as an ecosystem builder about 8 years ago in a nascent Bangladeshi startup ecosystem. So from angel investing to putting on the first networking events to just getting people together for seminars, and then eventually starting and running an accelerator. So we have that background, and I think from my experience in both aspects, I think there's a lot of collaboration that can be had between investors and what they bring to the table and incubators. And I think one of the things that our friend from Sri Lanka had mentioned was that we really look at teams. And I don't think that it should be any different in terms of our incubators. The incubator teams really need to be people that can execute even on training these startups. So the people that are helping coach these companies also have to have very good organizational abilities, but also hopefully have some entrepreneurism in them. The best way to learn is from people that have done it before. So having a strong either core team or an auxiliary team from mentors is essential. And most investors, they have a portfolio of companies they've invested in. So if you can deploy your portfolio companies to help mentor some of these incubatees, I think that's something that we can help with. I think that a lot of the times, looking at growth is something, and looking at metrics, diving down and focusing on what's important for growth and for success in terms of business is something that investors can really help with. I think that probably it would be worthwhile to have some of the programming that happens in an incubator, because usually these are structured programs. Some of those feedback should be taken from investors to actually take their advice, take entrepreneurial advice into designing these programs. So all the way from programming to helping with the pipeline, seeing which teams to filter out, because as we discussed, teams are important. So who you choose to incubate is also very important. So having people involved from investment teams to help choose who those people are might also stand to give them some buy-in, that maybe down the line, oh, I had a choice in this. Perhaps I can also go on, help, and even fund these companies down the line. So I think that one other point that I'd like to make is that venture capital is institutional funding. And there's an entire ecosystem chain that is required in an ecosystem, right? From incubators to accelerators to the entrepreneurs themselves. Without the entrepreneurs, none of this would be possible. They really are the keystone. To angel investors, to venture capital. And they all feed into each other. And so I think that a collaboration between all these parts is necessary. So while we talk about venture capital, and I sometimes think that their station is overplayed, what really incubators will benefit from are angel networks. Those are the people that will be investing in them first before they move on to venture capital funding, institutional funding. It's very rare to find institutional capital to go into that early of a stage of a company. So tapping this part of the ecosystem is also very important. Having a developed angel network, angel frameworks, people that you work with on a day-to-day basis as an incubator to help these companies along is also very important. So I hope that's useful, and I've already learned so much from our other panelists. So I hope this feedback was useful.
Thank you, Samad. You have touched 2 points, right? One is venture VCs as an institutional funding, but more importantly, you mentioned about the mentorship that is required for the incubators. Right? Regarding the funding, I'll come back to you with a follow-up question. But with the first point on mentoring that you have mentioned, my question is to Mr. Mano, right? Who is also playing a role as an investor, right, in Sri Lanka, right? Mano, my question is, providing mentorship to startup requires experience and skills dexterity, right? In your opinion, what would be the ideal composition of the team, right? And how a mentor, a pool of mentors can be helpful for the success of the startups? Or can you talk about the mentoring processes or the team effectiveness?
Suresh, when you talk about the team, you're talking about the startup team.
Yes, mentoring and the startup team.
Yeah.
Right. You will have a pool of mentors, and one mentor cannot be associated for the entire journey of the startup, right? So yeah. At every stage, we have to have the pool of mentors, and they should also get in line, or the frequency should be matched, right, between the mentors also. So yeah. It's about the composition of the mentors as a big team.
Yeah. So I think it's a good question. It's to get the mentors in alignment with what the startup is required. So every startup, the founder has a core strength, right? Or the couple of founders have some very core strength, maybe in terms of technology, or in terms of vision, and or in terms of execution. So I think what's very important at the early stage as an investor and as part of a incubator ecosystem, what we need to look first is where are their strengths, right? And very, very often you would find they're very good in ideating those products. They have a vision. They're technically savvy, and especially from Southeast Asia, every technologists want to be an entrepreneur, and that's a good thing. But they lack business acumen, right? And they really lack is to think out of the box, to think the things which will make them successful, right? I think that's the key. So I think incubator has to really look the type of startups they're going to mentor, right? Is it deep science, and where you need to have very deep knowledge in sort of domain specific or technology specific, and then you have to build the teams around those skills, right? So I think it is very important. And very often, as angel investor, like our colleague from Bangladesh said, they play a pivotal role, right? Because they have to have skin in the game. So if I'm an angel investor, that's why it's so important that the incubators work hand in glove with the angels and the investors, because they're the ones who will have that type of skill, who have seen it, done it before, and they have those expertise. So you need to draw from your angel investors and from your marketplace, and then they also have to be incentivized to be part of the team to mentor these at different phases. So I think, Trish, for me, it's the type of skill is really of your startup is to build them to pre-revenue stage, right? And that they have to have the market validation, and that they can stand on their own and then take back this thing. And that's why they have to have very good experience of, I think someone said, is about ex-entrepreneurs who have failed, who have built successful companies, to bring that type of knowledge in. Because in Southeast Asia, if you look at the average age of all startup founders are 30 plus or less, that's right. And so it's important to bring within your team very mature people who have seen that, done that before, and also to be very specific in the skill set of the domain, what they're trying to do, right? So it's a combination of everything. And the best is to draw from your pool of ecosystem players, right, to be a part of your team, because you can't, it is also economy of scale. If you're having 50 incubators is fine, but if you are running one or few, then you have to leverage from your ecosystem. I hope that answers your question.
I think Mr. Ramanan has a point to add to the point. Over to you, Mr. Ramanan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Suresh. And I think it's a very important point that you discussed. You see, an incubator, and as I think one of the earlier speakers also pointed out, it's not just a workspace. It's not a place where you're just giving a startup a place to sit down and work and say, hey, now the ball is up to you, is in your court to become successful. The incubator has to feel very tied up with the startup success. They have to make them investable. That is their job. So the incubator is really an extension of the startup. Unless the CEO of that incubator, and as another speaker pointed out, you have to have a dedicated CEO who is passionate about every startup that is going to be there in their fold. They have to make them succeed. If you don't have that sort of attitude, you are unnecessarily running an incubator. You're really not running an incubator. Now, the second point is you talked about the point of mentorship. And that mentorship is very, very important. In fact, at Atal Innovation Mission, we have taken extraordinary lengths to build up a huge network of mentors for all our initiatives. We run multiple initiatives, and I'll come to that point also, how important it is to run other initiatives when the government is looking at incubators. You cannot just run incubators in isolation and think that you're going to have brilliant startups who are going to come up and succeed. That's not going to happen. You have to have a mechanism of generating potentially innovative people. So you have to build a culture of innovation. So that's why we have launched thousands of tinkering labs in schools, because these students, when they go to the universities, they already acquire a problem-solving, innovative mindset, curiosity, imagination, and an entrepreneurial spirit and drive, and design thinking and critical thinking, which are 21st century skills. If you don't have all of that, you are really having a handicap in starting a startup. So you need to build that ecosystem, which is very important. And then once you are in the incubator, you have to have a set of mentors who are specifically bringing different capabilities to the fore. So what we have done is we have built a network of mentors across the country, one of the largest mentors, I guess, in the world, where more than 10,000 mentors have registered voluntarily from industry, from academia, from government, from domain knowledge skills from research institutions, and they give their, and we have mapped their skills. And the skills have to be mapped based upon, there are certain people who are technology specialists, some of them are domain specialists, some of them are legal specialists and financial specialists, some of them are IPR specialists. So we have classified them, and then to all the incubators and startups, we have made available a pool of mentors so that they know that these are the set of people whom they can approach. And we have introduced, while a mentor is physically associated with a couple of incubators directly because of the proximity of that mentor to that incubator, at the same time, this entire list of incubators is available for them to be able to connect to. The third thing that is very important is collaboration with specific organizations. Incubators should facilitate collaboration with technology centers of excellence. As Sansini pointed out, they have mapped a certain set of technology centers of excellence in artificial intelligence or IoT and so on, because this knowledge is not available to the startup, and the startup often needs this knowledge for closing that last mile gap. Similarly, you need collaboration with domain specialists. Like, for example, in India, we have collaboration with ISRO for space technology, with ICAR and ICMR for agricultural technology or medical technology for biotech and so on. The third thing is, what do you do for the startups? And therefore, I think one of the speakers mentioned about a consolidated strategy. I think it was Narottam who said that you should have a consolidated strategy for incubators. Now, what it means is, when you're talking of the supply part, innovative, talented people should find an entry and an ability to start their startup. But subsequently, you also need an ability beyond where you are able to implement the innovations of their incubator into the community. So what we have done is we have set up Atal community innovation centers in tier 2, tier 3 cities of the country, where the startup's idea can be piloted and tested out in a real site. See, very often startups think that their product is going to succeed immediately. It's not going to succeed unless it is tried out, tested, re-engineered, and acquires the right quality and the right functionality and the right usability to be able to be implemented. And finally, we also launched in the government a series of challenges called Atal New India Challenges and Arise Challenges. These challenges are meant for the startup community, and the incubators play a very important role in fostering these challenges. These challenges identify startups who will have products for addressing those challenges, or can create products for addressing the challenges, because the government becomes a buyer of these. We work along with the government and various ministries to launch these challenges. So for example, we launch challenges with the Agri Ministry, or we launch challenges with the Health Ministry or Drinking Water and Sanitation Ministry and so on. And when you have an innovation for them, you are able to immediately find a buyer in the government, and thereby encourage this whole process. And as Sansini said, they also have a similar process. What in India we have is the government e-marketplace, the GEM marketplace. And all startups in India can actually log on their product to GEM, and they become automatically eligible and become a preferred point of buy for any government procurement related to similar products that the government wants. So this is the ecosystem that is required. And an incubator has to play a very important role in all of these aspects, in engineering the supply of innovators, in being able to show how they can be connected to the various collaborators, corporates or venture capitalists or angel networks that you're talking about, as well as enable them to implement their products through pilot locations in their own surrounding community innovation centers and so on. So I think a very holistic approach by the incubator is absolutely needed if they want to succeed. Otherwise, it's just going to be another workspace, and that you have plenty of workspaces across in the world. That's not going to make any difference or any change to the startup community.
Thank you, sir, for the extensive reply, and you have covered the entire journey of an incubation center. But it also puts me to put a question to Mr. Narottam again, because he's the president of an academic institution, the President's College, right? And because all the panelists have touched about not only the infrastructure, they talked about funding, they talked about mentorship, they talked about networks, networks with technology centers, networks with domain centers, right? So my question to you as the head of an education institution, okay, is that how the incubators, academic incubators, right, can leverage or how an academic institution be ready to establish this kind of an ecosystem within the institution, right? If you have an incubation center, and Mr. Ramanan mentions that if you don't have this kind of activities, initiatives, then it's just another workplace, right? So in being a head of an education institution, what is your viewpoint and how the academic should be prepared to establish this kind of an environment?
Thank you again, Suresh. I think academic institutions all over the world have played a very, very vital role in creating and nurturing that entrepreneurial mindset. So there is, I think, no point of discussion about the importance of the universities and other academic institutions in sort of playing a role, critical role. Actually, I was discussing with a few of my colleagues like yesterday about how we can take it to next level. There is a question, whether a startup founder has to have certain years of experiences working in a corporate, have that network, gather experiences in different verticals of the business, collect some money, collect some wisdom, and then only start your business, then you are likely to succeed more. That may be true, but then I'm always of a very, very strong opinion that academic institutions, it's not necessary that you have to join the corporates to have that experiences. For example, you are an undergraduate student who are there for at least for 3 to 4 years inside the campus. Within the campus, you have the leverage of the infrastructure, you have the leverage of the network of the university, you are surrounded by many, many other young talents from different fields. And on top of that, if you are a student, at least in Nepal, that I can say that, the people will really sort of support you. You can easily go and visit a CEO of a top company because people give you an access, because people love the students' initiatives and people love to see the students being active. So that's why, if we can provide that, environment and ambience for the students to take advantage and to leverage all these facilities, infrastructure, networks, so in that case, the students. Sorry, I just one of my colleagues just entered and I missed the flow. So just to recapitulate what I was trying to say is, I think academic institutions are well equipped to provide that kind of support to the students and to nurture that entrepreneurial mindset. And as Mr. Ramanan was saying before, the critical foundation for a startup to succeed is to have that innovative mindset in the DNA of the founders and other team. So I think academic institutions can play a very, very vital role in nurturing that entrepreneurial mindset or innovative mindset, creative mindset while they are at the college. On top of that, in modern day learning, academic institutions can provide a very, very safe environment for the students to try and fail. Unlike in the past, where it's failure was sort of kind of a shame, but then I think we now we are encouraging the failure and experimentation and exploration. So if we can create that kind of environment through the incubation center in-house, I think that's really, really critical. Oh, I would like to share with you one anecdote. I was participating in a consultation meeting organized by one of the largest donor agencies in Nepal, and then there were a lot of investors like our colleague from Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and they were talking about $1 million funding, and they were complaining all the time that they don't have investment-ready companies. And donors were talking about having to set up a big, again, big private equity firms. But then I was of the opinion that until and unless you have so many startups young minds, innovative minds, creative minds at the school, at the college, you can't have big companies to be invested at the top. So that's why if we really want to have those investment ready companies at the top, you have to work on the ground. We have to sort of start from the as Mr. Ramanan rightly said, we have to start from the school, not only from the college, let alone the college. So if we can work on those young minds at the early age, provide them sufficient ground and support in experimentation and in exploration, I am quite sure later on we will have many investment ready companies. So that's my sort of view on that. Thank you. Once again, I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Narottam. And we are touched about creating entrepreneurial mindset among the student community. And also you mentioned about creating funding or creating an ecosystem for the funding, right? This leads to a question to Samad, because he was mentioning that VC funding is an institutional funding and you have to prepare the startups with enough mentoring and to approach the VCs, right? If that is the case, what is your opinion, whether an incubation center should have its own in-house funding? The initial kind of seed funding or kind of innovation fund, so that they can take the early stage risks, and then when the people who have been successful in those stages has to be given a pipeline to you. What is your opinion on having an in-house funding at an incubation center?
Thank you for the question. I think that it's definitely helpful if an incubation center can support through financing. They're providing all sorts of support. Why not a little bit of funds to get them through the day so that they can move into the next stage of funding? That said, it's not the end all and be all. A lot of times we get a lot of emphasis put on investment. Are these companies investment ready? Let's judge our incubator by the metric of follow-on funding. Whether or not a company raises external capital does not mean it's a success or a failure. I think the most successful companies might be the ones that don't have to raise funding because they're sustainable and growing and able to maybe even do with debt, which is so much cheaper these days than equity financing or other modes of capital. For example, now in Bangladesh, as well as I'm sure the other countries, they have grants. So that's a place where the government might also be able to play if they're doing something in sustainability or perhaps even impactful, there may be other grants that they can avail. It's about the entrepreneur or the entrepreneurs. Do they have the grit to be able to squeeze out whatever resources they can from every rupee, every taka, every dollar, every shilling? Are they able to go to alternative sources of financing? Can they negotiate supplier credit? So it comes back to these entrepreneurs coaching, picking the good ones. I think our esteemed Mr. Ramanan mentioned about, how we can find those entrepreneurs and support them in the first place, and having it even from the school system and inculcating a mindset of innovation. And then being able to pick the right ones and supporting them to the end of their ambition of what they want to build. So certainly it's a helpful step to have external fund that can support these companies, but all resources should be towards supporting the proper entrepreneurs, because if they've got numbers, the money will come.
Okay. Thank you. Right. This also puts more pressure on the incubation managers to become investment managers. Right. Building an incubation manager team itself is a difficult task, and right, incubation community will strive for it and will move forward. Right.
If I may just add here, yes, Suresh Kumar, I think this point is a very important point. And actually, when we select an incubator, or when government decides to give grants to the incubators, we actually ensure that they already have a very comprehensive team. So you have to have a dedicated CEO. At the same time, you need a finance expert. You need somebody who can have an outreach event and media communications capability. You need somebody who will also have a good systems management and help startups be able to measure and create IT dashboards and so on and so forth. So we insist on a small team of 3 or 4 people who have to be associated with the incubator, and that becomes part of the incubator's plan before we even give a grant to them. And so these are some mechanisms by which, when government grants or even private sector wishes to give a grant to a particular incubator, you can ensure that. And I just wanted to add one point, because it has not come up, and which I think is very important, is the gender diversity. Women-led startups, out of the 1,600 startups which have come up in the last 2 years, just in Atal Innovation Mission, and in India, we have 55,000 startups today. But what was heartening was more than 500 are women-led startups in this 1,600 startup, which means almost 33% or 32% of the startups are women-led startups. Whereas in India, we still have only 13% entrepreneurs as women entrepreneurs. So I think it's very, today incubators give the women entrepreneurs and women innovators a great opportunity. Otherwise, as it is for even for men, the pressure from society or young boys is go and start working in a job and seek a job and join Google, IBM, TCS, or whatever company, right? But they don't give them the encouragement for starting a startup, even if they have a brilliant idea. The incubator provides you for 2 years this ability to exercise your creative capability and come up with a startup. And when they provide for women, it becomes even more, important because women are even, under greater pressure, societal peer pressure in today's environment, which is changing very rapidly, to be able to start their own initiatives. So I think incubators can provide this wonderful opportunity for women to increase the entrepreneurial quotient of the country.
Yes, sir. It's a great point that you have raised, and we have not touched for last 1.5 hours about the gender diversity. And like we should, as an association, we should also look at what is the percentage of our incubators right, focusing on supporting women entrepreneurs. Right. Thank you for the insights, sir. Moving to Mr. Doji. Quickly, right, because Mr. Ramanan has briefed about the policies, it was very holistic policies that's been launched by Government of India. And Ms. Ansane has also mentioned about the policies of Thailand. Can you list out at least 3 or 4 important policies of government of Bhutan in promoting startup ecosystem? Government policies.
Sorry, I was in mute. So, yeah, our government has also recognized the importance of startups. And when we talk about startups, especially in the Bhutanese context, it is kind of synonymous with the SMEs. So the SMEs are very important. So we don't really have any unicorn examples to talk about right now, nor any other kind of a tech business that has really scaled up to a great height. We don't have such examples. So right now, when we talk about startups, we are talking about mainly the SMEs kind of businesses. So the government has recognized this sector as very important. So even from the government side, the startups and the SMEs are looked at in a similar fashion here. So it, especially the previous government, they identified 5 jewels of the economy, and the startups and the SMEs, they form one of the jewels, one of the 5 jewels. So the government considers it very important. And the government has done quite a lot of undertaken quite a lot of initiatives to support the startups. So, for instance, giving some preference in terms of the government procurement, if it is something that is made wholly in Bhutan. So, this kind of initiatives has been taken. But probably one of the most effective or impactful one might have been in terms of the awareness and education. So there has been a lot of initiatives taken to make the young people aware of entrepreneurship as a career choice. So there has been a lot of entrepreneurship trainings and things like that. These are some of the good things that the government has done. So government has also come up with a startup center. It is basically an incubation center with a lot of shared facilities and the dedicated management over there. Going ahead, the government is also trying to build a lot of fab labs attached to the institutes and universities and things like that. So these are some of the positive side, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, there is a need for more coordinated and focused approach, and also a little bit more clarity in terms of the way that we want to promote and support the startups. So I think these things will come up soon. So that's where the policies are at right now.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning about the policies and also the gaps that want to be addressed. But anyhow, that question I want to ask Mr. Tashi, because he's from the same economy and the same country. So Mr. Dorji has mentioned about the policies of the Bhutan, right? And you are on the other end, right? You're on the receiving end, being an incubation center and also a startup founder. What are the gaps that you find in your incubation ecosystem? Right, but Dorji has mentioned that there are some gaps and it has to be addressed. But is there any specific gaps that you find in the incubation ecosystem, not only with Bhutan, but your experiences with other economies?
Okay, so maybe since I always say myself that I'm an accidental incubator, so there's 2 things that I've noticed. So one locally is since it's a nascent startup ecosystem, one thing that we don't really have at the moment or the gap is that I see is we don't really have a consolidated entrepreneur ecosystem map, which depicts all these services provided by all these various agencies. We don't have such kind of a portal or a map which can suppose if an idea stage startup comes up, which agency should they approach, and what kind of support or what kind of event or and then what kind of policy support will be given by particular agencies or or the organization. So such particular startup ecosystem map is needed. We don't have this right now. I feel that way. And the other one, when it comes to the international ecosystem of the incubation, I feel we don't have a platform like this where we can discuss, where we can share our experience and explore some of the possible collaboration and market access. So these are the two things that I've seen as a gap. Last, thank you.
Thank you, Tashi. And very often you are mentioning that I'm an accidental incubator manager, but Mr. Ramana would have accepted that most of the incubator managers in India are accidental incubator managers. We have been taken that responsibility and we have shared ourselves as an incubator manager, and still we are learning to be an incubator manager. So that's the reality across the globe. And you have also mentioned that there is no such platform to have an international collaboration. But there was earlier there was an initiative called Asia Pacific Incubator Network, which has been supported by InfoDev and Department of Science and Technology. Because of that only, I had an opportunity to interact with all your Nepal friend or Sri Lankan friend, or had an opportunity to go to Thailand, right? So we'll look at the opportunity to revive that platform because things have been evolving. And the platform was very active between 2009 to 2013, right? Now we'll look at reviving that Asia Pacific Incubator Network. And you have also been mentioning
very happy to join that. Suresh Kumar ji will be very happy at the Innovation Mission to become part of this platform, because I think it's a very important point how we can collaborate. And there is so much market possibilities in all our countries. So it will be a great strength to the startups of all the incubators of our countries.
So we have been working with 20 countries during that period between 2009 to 13, Asian Pacific countries, and we had some exchange programs. And we'll try to revive with your support and with all the department support from our country. We'll take it up forward, sir. Since Tashi has mentioned about the collaboration between the economies, and the profile of Ms. Sansane says that she has been doing the soft launching program or co-incubation program with other countries. Can you explain your experiences in co-incubation programs quickly, about within 2-3 minutes? Over to you, Sansi.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the questions. In last year, we have been doing co-incubation program. If we talking about co-incubation program, I think we are talking about soft landing. But when we are real action, we're thinking that we have to do so much homework before you send your incubators from your country, or I will send Thai startup to your country. So we have to specify who is the strategic partner. Because of I am government, so I cannot help you to localize your products, inject to penetrate Thai market directly. So I think helping from the incubator is helping on do the market survey for the startup products or service that fit or not. For example, last year, I have Taiwan startups have very high technology about agriculture. But in Thailand, agriculture business, if you not sell to government, it's very hard because the farmer is like a low income. So we have to do a lot of homework. Who is the right customer that you have to come before, and who will be the strategic partner, because we expect that you establish your company in Thailand. So government can link up with the regulation, with the Thai strategic partner who can help you to find employees and help you to manage the employees in Thailand, and planning the strategic for expand market in Thailand or go to Southeast Asia. So this is what we do. So we do a lot of homework before you will send your incubators come. For example, I work with LACY. LACY is a LA Clean Tech Open Incubators. So the expert in LACY have some questions like a survey that if your products is not aligned to US regulation or Thai regulation, so it's very hard for you to cross country. So this is something that that is an idea, and I think incubator can help the startup to make the incubators under incubators to cross country. So this is a real quick for my answer. Thank you.
Okay. So whether you have any MOUs with other countries or other incubator agencies or with government agencies for the soft landing program, or what is the modality? Whether it is an incubator to incubator relationship or between the government agency to government agency relationship?
We work between incubator and accelerator or incubator to incubators, because if we know each other, so we helping by the, I think it's more quickly than startup go to the other country by themselves, because government or incubators will know the regulation and can do the market survey before you come.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm working through, I'm working through like an APEC acceleration network. And I think this is a kind of network that we can work with.
Yeah. There is a network called Asia Network, I think so, right? With Nepal and other countries. Asia Network is also been very active for the incubation last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Mr. Ramanan, sir, you're about to.
I just want to add that we have had quite a few collaborative initiatives with other governments where we have held startup exchange programs and innovation exchange programs. For example, with the government of Singapore, we have been participating over the last 3 events of Inspreneur, which is an annual event for startups and the innovators to present their solutions. And we have had 25 to 30 startups from our incubation ecosystem visiting Singapore and vice versa. So that way you're strengthening the collaboration between startups and possibly even incubators. Similarly, we have had with the Swedish government initiatives where you have launched challenges which are common to both the countries, so that startups who are having solutions for those challenges can get an opportunity to be selected. And then companies or corporates from both the countries support them, either from the point of view of some financial support they may need, or access to the marketplace, or in fine-tuning their products and solutions to the needs of the marketplace. So they bring their domain capability and so on. So there can be many innovative ways of collaboration beyond just an MOU between 2 incubators. And it would be great to explore such possibilities among the BIMSTEC countries.
Thank you, sir. And the AP network has also been doing having MOUs through the network members and trying to have the startups, exchange of startups, where first 1 year or 6 months, based on the incubators' individual policies, the other country startups will have an opportunity to have a free space, free operations, free support for first 6 months or so. And the host country will also help them with interns, the employees for the startups who is going to soft land there. So that was the model that we have been practicing. But I think it was too early at that point of time. The concept, let's rethink now and let's restart that initiative. I have an important question after having an extensive discussion about the incubation centers, various facets of incubation centers. The question that I have is for all the panelists, and I want 2 or 3 pointers, right? The question is, with COVID-19 hampering the functions of many industries, among the worst hit was also the startup ecosystem. How did incubators adapt to providing support to startups? What good practices are adapted to support startups virtually? Right? And I also have one more question, with B point of that question. It is not only the startups are worst hit, the incubators also got worst hit, right? As Ramanan sir mentioned, the success of the incubator relies on the success of the startup. If the startup is worst hit, then we have 3 times the impact, because if it is 1 startup, the impact is for them. If it is 10 startups, then the entire impact has to be carried by 1 organization, that's the incubation center. So what are the good practices that each one of you have practiced to overcome the challenge for the startups as well as for the incubation centers? Let's start with Ramanan sir.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important point that you raised and very relevant. In fact, as soon as COVID-19 struck, we realized that there would be a great challenge for the incubators as well as for the startups. But what we also did parallelly was we launched a search for COVID-19 related solutions that startups can provide or the industry could provide. And we looked at three categories. One is preventive solutions, second is assistive solutions, and third is curative solutions if they are in the formulation stage. We also said that if you have solutions for a post-COVID-19 world, because the COVID-19 actually created tremendous impact in terms of lockdown, in terms of access to the market, migration problems, livelihood problems, healthcare problems, and so on. So we asked our startups that do you have solutions that you are able to pivot to from where you are today to be able to address the post-COVID-19 world? And I have to say that actually the COVID-19 was a watershed moment in the startup landscape of our country. Because when we put out this challenge, in a matter of 4 weeks, we did not get many solutions from the industry, the large corporates, but we got more than 1,500 solutions from the startup world for addressing preventive, assistive, and potentially curative solutions in the marketplace. And we were also very surprised how so many solutions came. But what the startups did, and that is the beauty of startup world, because they're very agile, and they also realize that they have to position themselves where, supposing, for example, they were working on an AI-based algorithm or an imaging algorithm, or they were working on some software using artificial intelligence, they pivoted them to create solutions for what was needed in a COVID-19 and a post-COVID-19 world. And secondly, so out of this, what we did was we also asked all the others, industries, to support these startups during the time when we can operationalize these solutions in the marketplace, because they may need manufacturing support, logistics support, venture capital support, mentoring support, or access to some of the testing labs for regulatory purposes and all that. So there was a tremendous response by the industry also in this. And for the industry, it was a wake-up moment about the power of the startup community in India, especially in the COVID-19 world. And I think from my point of view, I come from the ITES background. And in the year 2000, we had the Y2K crisis. And the Y2K crisis opened up India's IT capabilities to the rest of the world. And it was a watershed moment for Indian IT, because until then, nobody much knew about, of course, there were a few companies like TCS and Infosys who were doing well, but the whole Y2K opportunity triggered a slew of companies which came up to address that problem. And thereby, the rest of the world woke up to the power of Indian IT. Similarly, in this COVID-19 phase, the power of the startup community came to fore. And it is now very clear by large corporates, institutions, as well as by the government, that we need to give tremendous focus on this startup world and foster this to the best of our ability. The other thing that we did during this COVID-19 crisis, that we
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Hello? Oh, sorry. I think it is Siri responding back on my laptop. So sometimes we have unnecessary technology interventions also. So anyway, we then, what we did was, we also got all the incubators together to get them to share their best practices of how they are extending the startup runway, because financial crunch was a very important thing. So what steps each startup was taking. And because we had this network of incubators, we organized a series of webinars. I mean, I think we have had more webinars because of digital and Zoom and all of these facilities which suddenly came to the fore. And the startups started learning from each other, incubators started learning from each other. And so far, I think it only had a positive impact. In fact, we said, why doesn't an incubator extend its services from a physical incubator to virtual incubation, so that more startups can join into the bandwagon of innovation? And that again opened up many new things. So it did open up new startups who could avail themselves of the opportunities. Venture capitalists started finding that through the digital medium, they are able to recognize the capabilities of startups and they were wanting to fund. So we organized a series of meetings with VCs and angel networks which exposed many of the startups to their world, and thereby, it also gave them some strength for meeting their financial runway. So there were many things that we did, and of course, at the end of the day, how do you pivot? How do you extend the financial runway that you have? And how do you
I didn't
network
catch that.
and
Could you try
collaborate?
again?
How do you network and collaborate with each other in order to be able to ensure that? This is what we did to make it work.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for an elaborate answer. We also faced, as an incubation center head, I also faced the challenges, but I think the AIM incubators are blessed with, because they are during their funding period, and they have that cushion to withstand it. But some of our incubation centers who have crossed the funding period has been self-sustainable mode, had some pains, initial hiccups to come out, and made us to think how to sustain ourselves, and also to sustain our startups too. Sansane, your experiences in handling the COVID-19 situation, the Thailand's experience in handling.
Okay, thank you. For my incubator from last year, I think COVID-19 is a good friend for the digital disruption, because before we are always doing everything on site, but from COVID-19, we do everything have to adjust to be online. For example, in my last year, since I think February, we are beginning of COVID-19 in Thailand, and we have to work from home. So we have to learning about many tools, IT tools, to make it happen. And I using WebEx conference to interview the potential incubators for about almost 200 startups. So I think it's kind of a challenge, and we work with them very well. So every program of incubator, including training, workshop, so we're doing online tools and also consulting and mentoring. So everything doing online until end of last year, that COVID-19 in Thailand is getting better. However, we are also have to help our startup to adjust themselves for survive the business. In Thailand, we have some tax deduction for some business who can maintain employment. So the regulation, we have to need to advise to our startup to make them can survive, and helping them, coaching them on changing the business model or the target customer to make them survive. So I think last year kind of challenge, and this year it's come back again in Thailand, COVID-19. So we back to work from home, and but I think we have experience, so we encourage some technology that is a trend after COVID, like a NASA license, like a touchless technology, or some hygienic. Or right now, I am incubating one of our researcher. He doing the COVID-19 test lab. That is the accuracy up to 98%, but we have to helping them to do raise fund for the for producing, and I think it's kind of challenge to make a deep technology, especially for the medical and healthcare is an opportunity. But for COVID-19, I think we mentor our startup not for survive, but the speed have to more quicker than before, because we don't know what is going to happen. So I think we can still running our incubator program via online, but sometimes if the we have to do on site, so we have to do like a social distancing or doing business in a new normal. So I think we change a lot, and I think everyone here have to adjust ourselves, and we will go through it together. Good luck for everyone too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any panelist who wants to share their good practices quickly? Yes, Samit.
Hi. So, well, look at where we all are today. We're in our own countries, hopefully on Zoom, coming together. What I would consider startup world leaders. You know, these are the people that are training these entrepreneurs, these incubators, This is talent that is collaborating across the world right now. And if COVID-19 has told us anything, is that talent is now global. We haven't mentioned Silicon Valley once during this Zoom session, and I'm so happy to hear that. But to take an example as to why it's been successful is because it's able to attract talent globally. People from Thailand, people from Nepal, people from Bhutan, people from India, people from Bangladesh. They're all going and contributing to these American companies, but they're global companies because of their talent base. And if incubators are able to collaborate virtually and online and take in more and more companies, maybe even from other countries, then perhaps they can also facilitate for those companies talent from everywhere. You know, as an entrepreneur, you want to find the best person to do the job wherever you find them, right? And through the collaboration of incubators, from a regional standpoint, we could find the best people for not just a Bangladeshi company, but turn this into not these silos of our nations, but to really great companies that that have the best talent, and it's doable with Slack, Zoom, all these technology talents. And that's what I wanted to leave with the last thought from myself was, because the teams are so important, the talent is now readily available all over the world. Thank you.
Suresh, if you,
yes, Manoj.
Yeah, I'd like to make a few closing remarks. One thing is in Sri Lanka, we have seen, to me, every corporate is a startup after post-COVID because they have to reinvent themselves into corporate realities. And I think it was a great lesson, just like all the speakers said, for the startups, they had to pivot, and they have to pivot very fast. And there's tremendous opportunity because of these digital disruptions. So one thing in Sri Lanka, I'm also part of the board of ICTA. What they did was to give all procurement, government procurement, under a certain level to the startups, to encourage startup to be in this post-COVID journey, right? Which is a policy, which is, I think it is fantastic that to get the startup involved in the post-COVID recovery, government procurement, especially in the ICT industry. So I think that is important. And pivoting for the future, as everyone said, is very, very vital. And talent is I think it's a good point raised by, said by the Bangladeshi delegate here. I think talent is, if we can collaborate on a regional basis, definitely our quality of our incubators will rise, because there is so much of talent what we can share, and also to deliver our promise to these startups. Thank you.
Narendra, you want to answer?
Yeah, thank you, Suresh. Once again, actually, like in many senses, especially for the startups, tech startups, this COVID has become a boon as well. Because like the adoption of technology, the rate of adoption has risen like, dramatically during this COVID era. So that's why I think like there are not only like, dark sides, but there are like a lot of like brighter sides as well. So not being so connected to the global economy, Nepalese startups are always looking for, and we're always looking for this global exposure and collaborations and interactions with other startups and other like stakeholders all over the world. So thanks to this technology, so it has provided an opportunity to interact with people. For example, this conference itself, right? So it's a good opportunity for the startups. So taking that advantage of this technology, so what we did, especially, let me mention that, we created a pool of like, mentors from all over the world, especially the Nepali diaspora who are sitting like, staying all over the world. So we are trying to capitalize on their and leverage their like network, their expertise and all. So that's the I think like one of the major achievements that we can main, like besides that, what we did is we formed a consortium of the different stakeholders of the ecosystem and lobbied with the government and provided support to the startups, like much needed supports to the startups. And also, like we were able to join the global, one of the global alliances of the incubators during this period. So I think yeah, that's what I just wanted to share. Thank you so much for providing this wonderful opportunity to share my ideas. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure talking to all of these panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nal.
Can I share?
Yes, Tashi.
Okay, so
and it can be considered as your closing remarks also.
Okay. So yeah, by the beginning of this COVID situation, what we did was with the help of our entrepreneur association here, we conducted a small survey on the impact the COVID had on the small businesses. And the interesting finding that we found out was most of the business were affected, but some of the business somehow they were benefited by this COVID lockdown and the social distancing situation, and especially the tech companies like delivery, logistic companies, they were benefiting out of that the COVID situation. And then we thought, so such companies can also be given some, incentive to do it better and to maybe to build their team. So we submitted our survey report to the task force where they were developing this contingency plan for the COVID. And the second thing, what we did and what we are doing currently is we are, like all the panelists said, we took the help of Zoom, and now we're conducting trainings online. So at the moment we are training around 71 aspiring entrepreneurs, just to engage them and at the same time give them some gist of what is like becoming an entrepreneur. So we are training them online. And at the same time, one thing what happened with like Suresh sir mentioned, it was really difficult for private incubation like myself to sustain with this pandemic. So what I did was I also started a food delivery services with the help of some of the startup. So these are something that we have done due to the COVID. Thank you.
Hello, Sureshji, can I make a last comment?
Yes, please. Sir, then I'll come to you, Prarambh, sir.
Okay, so it's my closing remarks as well.
Okay,
one thing we did during the COVID time was, the Ministry of Health here posed a challenge to the ICT sector. What can you do to help us, overcome some of these challenges? So all the players in the ICT sector, including the those in the private sector, and also some of the startups in our incubation center, we came together along with the government ICT officers, and we developed some of the applications that are still in use by the government, such as the tracing app, as well as the quarantine monitoring app and things like that. So that was one thing that we did together as a ICT sector, including the incubators of our incubation center. Now, going to the closing remarks. So this was a very useful session, and it really took me back to the days when we had that training in EDI, where Dr. Suresh was also one of the resource persons. And I really, got motivated once again, about the potential of the incubation centers. There is a lot that can be done and a lot we learned. But at the same time, when it comes to the real ground, we need to cut down on the activities as well as the manpower because of the sustainability issue. But, from today's session, I became more motivated, and I feel that the incubation centers in Bhutan need to be expanded and strengthened to play a bigger role going down the line. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doji. Thank you very much for the kind words. And you would have learned more things from Mr. Ramanan's initiative through Atal Innovation Mission, right? It is a value chain that they have created in the innovation and incubation movement, right? From challenges to the funding and to creating a marketplace, right? And more things will come in coming years too. Right. Thank you very much, Doji. And Sir Ramnan, sir, it is not a closing remarks for you because I have one special question to you. So if it's any points to add, that you can add.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a perspective of how we are now approaching, because I think it's a very important perspective, not just from India perspective, but for all the countries that we are talking about. We have been very struck by the Honorable Prime Minister's clarion call for Atmanirbhar Bharat. But what was very important was he identified 5 pillars which have to drive innovation and entrepreneurship across the length and breadth of our countries, and I'm sure it is for all the countries. First is the pillar of demographic dividend. So collectively, all the 5, 6 countries that we are talking about, the BIMSTEC countries we are talking about, we have a demographic dividend advantage which no other part of the world has. So how do you drive startups to address this opportunity? Because unless you leverage the demographic dividend, which means education startups, on distance learning, using augmented virtual reality, so on and so forth, how do you drive this? So that is the pillar of demographic dividend, which we should leverage in order to drive the innovation world, and incubators can play a very strong role in that. The second is the pillar of infrastructure. India itself has 750,000 plus villages. We have 715 districts. We have 4,000 small towns and cities. How do you build not only the physical smart infrastructure that is required, but also the digital infrastructure which is going to extend the reach of startups and innovation? How can we, for example, from Bhutan to Bombay, you are able to sell your products, or from Nepal to the Nilgiris and so on. So we want to make sure that digital transformation can drive, and digital infrastructure can drive the growth of e-commerce as well as the impact of startups. The third pillar that he talked about was the pillar of demand. With 1.3 billion people just in India, and then if you count all the other countries, this demand is tremendous. So you don't need to look elsewhere for the market. We don't need to look at global markets for servicing the demand. We can just look among the startup world within these 5 countries or 6 countries in the BIMSTEC countries to be able to service the demand, and there is enough opportunity. The fourth we looked at is the pillar of socio-economic progress. Now, this is very important. I think this topic didn't come up in detail, but social incubators and social innovation and social entrepreneurs are as important as commercially driven entrepreneurs and commercially driven startups. Because we have just in India 115 aspirational districts out of 715 districts, and these are at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of access to basic healthcare, education, hygiene, water management, affordable housing, or waste management. So there are, unless you solve this problem and eliminate the digital divide, the social divide, the economic divide, and the divide between the haves and the have-nots, countries cannot prosper uniformly across, and there will be huge gaps, and therefore there will be huge problems. So we are encouraging number of incubators to also have the social element in them and encourage social entrepreneurs. And finally, the power of technology, which we have all been talking about and experiencing. This is something which is unique now. AI, for example, we have been talking about since decades, but AI did not make much sense as of today, because you have so much of data, you have sensor technologies, you have satellite communication, 5G, you have the power of data processing, data analytics, supercomputing, nanocomputing. So all of this coming together makes artificial intelligence a reality today. And how can we use this artificial intelligence not only in the running and the operation of the incubators, but in encouraging startups to leverage this technology and be able to create new opportunities and solve the problems of the world. And finally, I do want to make a mention that incubators have a very important role in education and awareness of sustainable development goals for startup community. Whatever new innovations they are creating, if they are aligned with sustainable development goals, it's going to be successful, whether it's electric mobility or robotic waste management and all of that stuff, or reuse and circular economy. But more importantly, if we are also able to, address this important opportunity that we have in being able to create new solutions for existing problems, or eliminating existing problems, or minimizing it, using, for example, precision agriculture and IoT-based, agricultural improvements and so on. There is a huge opportunity out there. So I just thought I will add this little bit in the discussion that we have been having so far.
So I think you partly answered the the second part of maybe other questions, I think. So thank you for this, because my question had two components. The last question for you had two components. The one component is, can you provide insights on 5 most important policy provisions that must be undertaken to optimize incubator performance? I think you have addressed that question without asking that question. Thank you. The last question is, right. The ecosystem has realized the need to define clear policies and processes to properly channelize CSR policies, right? And incubation center has also been considered under the CSR support by the industry. But we have not leveraged much. We means almost, if you look at the number of incubators that we have, even after the policy provisions, we are not able to leverage the CSR funding. Can you give some insights, and we'll take it as a closing remark also on the CSR policy?
I think you brought a very important point. We do need, in India, for example, and I think that's true in most of our countries right now, 70% of research and development and innovation funding comes from the government, and only 30% comes from the private sector. And we need to change that equation. If you look at any advanced economy, whether it is Korea or Austria or US or Europe and so on, 70% of research, innovation and entrepreneurial funding comes from the private sector, and 30% comes from the government. So if you want to do that, we at Atal Innovation Mission, one of the things that we have been encouraging now, we open up the innovation centers not only to universities, but also to the private sector. And we are encouraging applicants, incubator applicants, where you have a 50% or matching contribution from a private sector partner. Now, private sector also, when they see that the government is involved and giving part of the funding, they are more actively involved rather than one expecting that they should fund the entire incubator or the entire startup ecosystem. And secondly, we are able to see much better results because of multiple stakeholders in the same incubator. If the incubator is just being given a grant from the government, then 70% of the time after the grant runs off, they apply either to the same entity or to apply some other entity to get another grant. But outcome-oriented, results-oriented, we holding this incubator that 60 to 70% of your startup should become self-sustainable and should be able to stand on their own legs, and having measurement and outcome orientation through dashboards. We have implemented real-time dashboards across all our incubators, and that is tremendously useful because that dashboard helps them to ascertain whether the incubator is becoming sustainable, self-sustainable, whether the startups are becoming self-sustainable, whether they are creating more number of jobs, whether the intellectual property and patents are increasing. All of these factors go to making an incubator successful. And so we need these measurement mechanisms. And in the government, we have, as you rightly said, we have been able to enable CSR contribution towards any innovation towards an incubator or Atal Tinkering Labs or community challenges or community innovation centers and so on. So this is a big policy step that the government has taken. Other countries also should similarly encourage such CSR contributions and make it easy for them through a policy. And finally, one of the persons remarked, and I thought that was very important. They said, can we become the voice of the startup ecosystem? Incubators have a fantastic opportunity to become the voice of the startup ecosystem through their collective, thing. So we are looking at incubators. We encourage them and say, you are the voice of the beneficiaries. So come back to us and tell us what other changes we need to do in policy, in regulation, or in enablement, so that we are able to make your startup succeed, and thereby we are able to make you succeed.
Thank you very much, sir. And it was a wonderful session. On behalf of the organizing committee, I take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for your participation in the 50th year celebration of the Startup India launch. And I also thank the organizing committee for putting a structure of this program and bringing in all the panelists together. And our thanks to all the participants. And we look forward to a vibrant startup ecosystem and the startups in the coming days. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh Kumar, and our compliments together for a wonderfully conducted session, which you moderated so very nicely, and you asked all the right questions to all the people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.